Are you looking for new books to read? Do you like finding a new special author? Are you tired of the same old books from the same old authors? Well then, welcome to Discovered Wordsmiths, a podcast where you can hear from fantastic new authors. Join Stephen Schneider as he finds and talks to authors you may not know, but authors that have worked hard to write great new books. Hear about their book and why you should check it out. So sit back and listen to today's Discovered Wordsmith.
All right, so we'll get started. We're back. Boom. Part 2, the B episode for authors, delving into that. So, Jennifer, is this your first book, The Year of the What? Is that your first book?
It's my first novel. It is not my first book. So my first book was published in 2014, and it was a collection of poetry, and it was published as kind of like an offshoot of trying to get Year of the Slut published, which is now Year of the What, because it was based on my one-woman show where I basically chose 5 racy poems that I had written, and I created a story arc around these 5 poems. So there is some poetry in Year of the What. There are a few of the poems in the book. But when I was trying to pitch that to some different publishers, one gentleman that I came across, I wanted to have a backup. Because I always kind of knew that I wanted to have a collection of my poetry published as well. So, and this is like coming off, like the height of 50 Shades of Grey being the biggest book in the world. So it's erotic poetry, and the book is called Oral Sex, oral with an A, because I think I'm clever, and poetry is meant to be listened to and read aloud.
Nice. Right.
So it was called Oral Sex, Naughty Notes for Lovers. So that was my first book, and it's not available anymore. I got a little disheartened through the process. So it was available on Amazon for a couple years, and then I took it down and decided to go forward with Year of the Slut full force on my own without partnering with anybody.
And you said you're working on a sequel. So what are some things through this process that you have learned that you're doing different now than you did when you started?
I'm utilizing more help.
Nice.
Yes. So the first time around, I guess I was a little cocky because the play had done well and I had won an award for it. So when I wrote my first draft of the book, and also because an agent had said, write that book and I'll rep you. So I kind of took things for granted in the sense that, like, I sent the manuscript to him without sending it to a proofreader or an editor first, because I was like, well, he said he was going to rep it. Like, I'll just send it to him when it's done. I'm like, no, honey, no, that's not how it works. But you don't know what you don't know. I was so green and I was so naive about the literary world. Like, what did I know? Like, I didn't need an editor for my play. That's what my director was for, to tell me what worked and what didn't, and what jokes were funny and which ones were terrible.
Right.
So over the course of all the rejections. So I first started, I just sent it to like 5 girlfriends, 5 of my squad who were avid readers and who had an interest in books. One was a journalist, one was a teacher, one was an English professor, one was my sister-in-law, one was my best friend. And I just kind of sent it to that group and took for granted that they all thought it was great in their excitement, and didn't seek professional help, which I should have. So this time around, definitely like working with a writing coach to help me with story structure and working with those people as I go, as opposed to kind of being set in my way and then pushing back with an editor against, the direction they're trying to push me in. So having those conversations prior to having 3 drafts already written and rewritten. So things like that.
Oh, good. Well, I mean, that's part of it, though, is learning. And I think there's a lot of authors that have heard some of the same advice, but disregard it and end up learning the same thing. So maybe we can help some people.
Well, let me put it this way. Michael Jackson, even up until his last album, worked with a vocal coach. Michael Jackson, the greatest singer of all time, who'd had a career since he was like 5 years
Six. Yeah.
old, used a vocal coach. If that doesn't mean anything to you, then I can't help you.
Right. Because we're all blind to our own art. I've learned that the hard way, and I'm sure many other authors have also. Um,
Yeah.
so when you're writing, what do you use to write? What services, what software, what's kind of the tools you use?
Yeah, so I am so old fashioned. I outline everything with a pen and a notebook.
Nice.
So I literally I begin handwriting. Because I'm the type of writer, I like to know my story beats. I know some writers just kind of like to dive in and they don't know where they're going to go. I like to know, I like to kind of flesh out my character descriptions. I like to know my story beats. I like to have a map. I call it a roadmap. Sometimes I detour off the map, like once I get heated up and I'm writing. So that's like the first go-to is like I'll start with a fresh notebook that's for that particular project. And and it's even kind of like a cool sensorial process of like picking a book that speaks to like artwork on the book that speaks to what I'm trying to write or trying to say. So every time I look at it, before I open it up, or if I'm in mid thought and I close it and I look at the front of it, like it kind of keeps reinforcing what this story is about, because sometimes we can get lost. Like sometimes our ideas can get very convoluted. And one thing I've learned about like filmmaking is you have to have like one consistent idea that the story is driving at from beginning, middle, and end. Of course, there's going to be, like the B storyline and the C storyline and the guest stars and the supporting characters, but you have to stay consistent with that overarching idea. So that's one of the things that I do. It's a weird visual thing that I like to do that keeps me kind of on track. um and then I just use Microsoft Word, like,
Okay.
and I just kind of like do my manuscript from there, and then I send it. I work with an editor and a proofreader, and then I have somebody format it for me for the final product. Is there better software?
Well, I've heard all sorts. I mean, I personally use Scrivener. I fell in love with Scrivener. I did start with Word and very quickly realized I'm like, okay, once I get to page 327 and I've got 17 chapters and I'm trying to move something or look something up, I was like, Word just wasn't for me.
Got it.
I realized. So Scrivener, I discovered quickly allows you to kind of do a corkboard mode, and it's
Okay.
almost like index cards, and you can write little notes. So it's like, okay, this chapter is summary and chapter, and then you could literally just move them around, and then you go into the binder, and every chapter is its own little file, and it's just for me makes so much more
Yeah,
sense.
it's so funny because like I will use post-it notes and I will use a whiteboard, and I guess I'm just more of like a tactile person. Like my brain gets a little scrambled when everything's digital. So that's why I like having my notebook and my map. And a lot of times, for when I'm working on a script, I will have like, I'll have one whiteboard for my character outlines and my character arcs, and then I'll have another whiteboard. And I use post-it notes because you can just stick them and move them around, and then I'll color code like A storyline, B storyline, and I'll like I'll make sure that everything kind of corresponds correctly. So the Scrivener sounds like an amazing tool. I just don't know if my brain would benefit from that because I like having it physically.
Right. Well,
in front of me.
that's the thing I think I've learned and discovered, and I tell others, try a little bit of everything and see what works
Yeah.
best for you, because there's multiple choices. You know, if you, I think Scrivener has like a 30-day trial, or
Oh, cool.
they may even do one of those things where you can write, you just can't compile to a final form. So it lets you try it all out. It works for some people and not for others. You know,
Hmm.
just try it, see what works for you. Get whatever works for you the best, so you can write and you don't have to worry so much about your tools.
Yes, I'm definitely going to look it up though, now that I'm aware of it.
Yeah, cool. I'd love to hear back from you later, see if you liked it or if it just didn't work. That'd be cool.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
So let's talk a little bit about censorship. This is an interesting topic with you because you ran into problems with your book initially. So why don't you give
I
everybody the
did.
story of what happened and how it affected your book and thinking and all of that?
Okay, so my one woman show was called Year of the Slut, and I got so many great responses from the title. Like, and this is like my favorite story. And this is how I knew I had a great title. So it was literally December 31st, New Year's Eve. I was in Santa Monica. A friend of mine was visiting me from Canada, and we were in a store, and Robert Downey Jr. was in the store.
Nice.
And I had just seen him at like a Q&A for one of his films at the Directors Guild, and I was just like, "Oh my god, it's Robert Downey Jr." And he was like incognito. He had like a cap on, and he had this like bright orange hoodie. Like, he didn't look cool. He didn't look like a movie star. You know, he was dressed like, please don't come up and talk to me.
I might be a mumbling crazy person.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And I was just like, "Oh my god." And I think he's brilliant. He's one of my favorite actors, like, you know, top of the list of somebody I would die to work with. And my friend's like, "Go give him a postcard. Give him a postcard for your show. Go give him a postcard." My show wasn't happening until February of that year, but you know, by the end of December, I already had some marketing materials, not the final ones, but I had some marketing materials. And she's like, and I'm like, I can't. It's Robert Downey Jr. So finally, we're like outside the store, and she's like, "You got to give him a postcard. Just wait around. He's going to come out eventually. Just give him a postcard." And he walks out, and he could tell that I was waiting for him. And he just like beelines, you know, past me down the sidewalk. And, you know, and I'm like scurrying to catch up to him. And I'm like, "I just wanted to congratulate you." And he's like, "On what?" And I'm like, "I saw you at at a Q&A for your new movie." And he's like, "Where?" And I was like, so like, I couldn't say anything. And, you know, I couldn't answer his questions, and I can tell he's running away from me. And I'm like, "I know you're running away from me, but I really," you know, it was one of those awkward moments. Of course, I didn't say, "I know you're running away from me," but I knew he was running
I
away.
would have said that. I would have said, I know you're running away from
I
me.
know, you know, and it's funny because now I would have, knowing what I know now, I would approach the situation much differently. And now I have more confidence to talk to celebrities. I've worked with some celebrities at this point in my life. But back then, you know, I didn't really, my nerves, you know,
Yeah.
I just blinked. So anyway, finally, I was like, "I'm sorry to bother you. I just wanted to give you a postcard to my one woman show." And he's like, "Fine." And he like, you know, I was behind him, and he just kind of, you know, put his hand back, like, "Give me your card and F off," type of thing. You know, he didn't say that, but it was very clear in his body language. And I give him my card, and he looks at it, and he's like, "You're the slut?" And he like turns around, and he's like, "This is your one woman show?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "This is a great title."
Awesome.
And he's like, "I wish you all the best with this show. I hope it's great." You know, and so from being somebody who was like literally running away from me, he looked at the title, he looked at the artwork, and he like stopped and engaged, you know, even though it was just for like a fleeting 30 seconds.
But
he,
yeah.
it was enough to like impact him. And he actually folded the card and like put it in his, like in his pocket on his person. He didn't toss it away, which I've given out lots of postcards for lots of shows, and people just toss them on the ground right in front of you. They don't even go to the wastebasket. They don't even go to the
Right.
recycle bin. They just toss it and they're like, meh, you know.
Right.
So I knew, because it was sanctioned by Robert Downey Jr., that I had a great title.
Right. Right.
So you can imagine how I was married to the title. And let's not forget that when I was brainstorming ideas with the woman who was encouraging me to do this show, she shot down a whole bunch of my ideas until I jokingly blurted out this title. And she's like, "Oh, yeah, that's it. That's a great title. Like it'll grab people." So I was very confident with the title Year of the Slut. And is it really a story about a slut? Well, maybe, but not in the way you think.
Yeah. Okay.
You know what I mean? Like and like I
It's almost
said,
tongue in cheek, like.
very tongue in cheek and very like, because that's the other thing. The character in the story, Dana, anything more than sleeping with the man who's going to be your husband is considered a slut. So for her to go on the journey where she has more than one sexual partner, in her mind, that is a slut, because what does that word mean anyway? So she goes on and finds out in this book what that word means to her, and redefines what that word means to her, and would have considered her roommate, the dominatrix, a slut, even though the roommate has an IQ off the charts and is brilliant and is, a really together solid person. So anyway, long story short, finally, after many, many years and many rejections and many ghostings of many people, a friend convinces me to just self-publish the book, even if it never goes anywhere from just having a picture of it on Amazon. So I did. And I hired a marketing manager, and I was actually like really jazzed about it. I thought like, this is going to be good. Like, why wouldn't people want to read Year of the Slut? They read 50 Shades of Grey. They read Sex and the City. Like, this is a genre that women enjoy. Like, why wouldn't people buy it? Well, they'd have to know about it first. So
There's the problem.
And there's the problem. So what happened was, you would think the internet, considering was like built on porn, you would think the internet would love a slut.
You just run the wrong services. That's all.
Yeah. So, Facebook doesn't like sluts. As woke as Facebook thinks they are, you would think like the wokest company in the world would embrace the sluts, but they don't. And then it's like Instagram. How do you get famous on Instagram? You show your tits and your ass. Instagram loves sluts. They just don't love the word slut.
Which is very funny.
Once again, I'm just going to preface, like, I'm not calling Instagram models sluts. I'm being very tongue in cheek. I'm being very comical about it. But it's like, okay, you put up provocative pictures of scantily clad women, but God forbid I advertise a book that has a conversation about what is acceptable and unacceptable sexual conduct for women. Meanwhile, 99% of all the Instagram influencers are selling sex. In their imagery. I'm not saying that they're sex workers. Please don't get that wrong. But if you're showing, if you're in bathing suits and you're showing your booty and you're showing cleavage, you are selling sex. That is what you're selling. You're selling this image.
It's discrimination then. It's like, wait a second. Yeah,
you know what I mean? So it's really funny because I'm not comfortable posting scantily clad pictures of myself. That would be more acceptable on Instagram than actually having an intellectual conversation about sexuality and about females and sex and promiscuity. So there's like the cognitive dissonance that we're living with
There's a
is
lot of that.
it's beyond, yeah, and this is just one very tiny little category of it in our society. So yeah, so I was censored by Facebook, Instagram, and Amazon, where the book is available. So I could post about the book, and I could post, excerpts from the book and things like that. I could not do any advertising. So posts, only people who are in my friends group can see.
Right.
So I was censored from breaking the barrier of moving beyond my friends group with this book. So it so I was dead in the water, and for a year I was trying really hard to find a way to like circumnavigate the situation and figure out how to get the book out there and how to beat the algorithm of censorship. And it just was not happening. And then in September of 2019, about a year after the book launched, a colleague of mine who's also an author and has a literary service, she teaches writing at a few different colleges. She's like, well, why don't you change the title? And I'm like, but the title is why I won the award. The title is why this show exists. The title is why the book exists. Robert Downey Jr. likes the title. Like, well, I can't change the title. That's and then a few months go by, and I'm literally rereading Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, as I reread every few years. And it was New Year's Day. I was like halfway through the book, and I come across the chapter about an author who couldn't sell his book and changed the title and became a bestseller. And I thought it was way too much of a coincidence that I hit that chapter on New Year's Day of 2020. And that at that moment, I was like, okay, fine. I can be right. I
Or
can be right about my title, or I can be successful.
there
And
you
I'm like,
go.
I'm
And again, I've said it a couple times. There's the lesson. I mean, actually this is a topic discussed at times about rebranding, retitle, and all that. And there you go. I got a couple questions. Let me back up a second.
totally.
First of all, I do remember an episode of Big Bang Theory where Leonard ends up having sex with this older lady to get money for the college, and Penny calls him a slut. So it is used in so
It's
it's just
used all the time. It's used on network television. It's not one of the 7 words that's censored.
right. So I find that interesting that the internet companies. But let me ask this: do you think that using words like that is more acceptable in the plays or the live theater as opposed to books and that? Because I remember when the vagina monologues came out, and that was a big deal, but it's now kind of accepted and you see it. And I think people have come to grasp with, well, if it's a medical term,
Mm-hmm.
so do you think that it's something that will change, or is plays?
So, so I did a couple of marketing courses, online marketing courses about social media marketing while my book was going through this like rebranding stage. And so I don't think it's an issue with words. I think it's a specific issue with these companies trying to be too woke. So this is what we have to all remember. These are businesses that have one goal: keeping people on their platforms as long as possible. So when I was taking these courses, the guy that was teaching the course used the example of, if you are a personal trainer, you cannot get an ad approved if you have a before and an after photo of somebody getting results from your training or from your program, because that is considered fat shaming. You can have before and after photos in your posts. You can have before and after photos in your page, on your story, etc. you cannot use it in an advertisement, because then Facebook or Instagram or Amazon is condoning this fat shaming.
I didn't know that.
So that's where we are in terms of they're not catering to a reasonable number of the population when they decide what ads get approved and what ads get disapproved. They are catering to the most offended, most sensitive person who's looking to get angry. Because there's a lot of those people on the internet, and they have their standards raised to that level of, is this going to make the most sensitive person angry? If so, we're not taking a chance with it.
If it's going to trigger somebody, is somebody going to get upset?
Exactly. And but I don't think that's helpful. That is not, you're not getting, what do I even say? It's like you're training the world to not be able to deal with reality.
Right.
Is that the most political correct way of saying it? Like, people can't deal with reality?
Everybody is entitled and everybody gets offended at, snap of a finger.
Yeah. So anyway, so I went back and forth trying to figure out like what the new title would be. And Year of the What sounds so simple, and it's even in the first chapter when the dominatrix roommate, says to the protagonist, this is going to be your year of the slut. And the character responds, year of the what? Kind of like getting her ready. Like, every girl kind of goes through this stage of her life where she realizes, and once again, the word slut means different things for different people. Like, for the character in this book, having sex with more than one man your entire life would make you a slut. So that was her reality. And sex doesn't necessarily mean intercourse. It can be hooking up, it can be, just messing around or whatever.
Right.
We don't need to get into the graphic details
Right.
of it, but it doesn't mean like actual intercourse. So, but I was like hemming and hawing for like weeks and sending different friends different ideas. And then it ended up being something so simple that was already written into the book. And
you've had a lot more success with it now.
I definitely have. And I have a fabulous publicist, Mickey at Creative Edge Publicity, whereas I had a couple publicists turn me down initially when I first launched the book with the Year of the Slut title. A friend of mine's sister's a publicist, and she's like, I work for too many family-oriented businesses. I can't take you on. It's a conflict of interest. So even publicists had like turned me down because they just felt like it was too controversial or too, risque, and they didn't want to take a chance with it. But I have a fabulous publicist who's getting me fabulous interviews with the likes of yourself, and he's gotten me some really great reviews from literary review websites and blogs and things like that. And it's just amazing, because when people actually like take the time to open up the book and look past the cover, there is something of merit in there, and there's something that everybody can relate to, and there's that personal journey of kind of getting past your own issues, because a lot of times in life, like, we're our own worst enemy, and we got to get past our own mental blocks before we can start to thrive or start to succeed in different things that we're doing. And so that's all in the book. The character goes through all of that, and she's so desperate to find love. Meanwhile, she's not in love with herself.
And I think the issue with the censorship, they do get too heavy-handed because, for example, your second book is going to be book 2, but it's about the year of the bitch, you said.
Mm-hmm.
I'll make sure and put a warning for parents that there's some terms they may not like. But what I'm getting at is there are dog breeders that use that word in relation to their dog breeding, and it's an accepted word for them. And what it's describing is exactly what they mean, and it's not
Yeah.
derogatory in that. So I wonder if they have issues doing any marketing, because I've written some divorce books. If you're divorcing somebody with narcissism or borderline personality disorder, and the terms that people look up are crazy X and toxic X, but I
Mm-hmm.
can't make any ads that refer to crazy X or toxic X, even though that's the terminology people are looking up, that they're
Yeah.
trying to find this stuff.
I did not grow up in a time of trigger warnings. And like I said, I don't think this hypersensitivity on social media or in our culture in general helps anybody.
Agreed.
I think we really have to be able to deal with the reality of what is. And what is the world is not that safe. The world doesn't come with a trigger warning. The world comes with lots of words that might upset us or offend us, but that's going to teach us more about our own issues than about the person using those words. And maybe we need to look in the mirror and come to grips with, you know, something in our own psyche or our own personality that we need to deal with in order to be able to be part of a healthy, functioning society where words are not censored and ideas are not censored, because that is the only way that we can move forward and thrive as a society.
You can't have an open society where people can express their own thoughts and ideas and have everything be censored because somebody's offended or it's like, move on. Whatever happened to the sticks and stones rhyme? I mean, aren't kids learning that anymore?
No, they're not, because now words hurt
Yeah.
more than a broken arm, apparently. And even like we take for granted, for example, the word bullying. You know, I'm sure when you were growing up, you got teased. When I grew up, I got teased. Had an older brother who would tease me all the time. He doesn't tease me anymore. He's now one of my closest friends. But he would tease me a lot. Teasing was not bullying, you
Right.
know? And today, any type of light form of teasing is called bullying. And I actually was listening to a podcast where an educator was talking about how the fact that kids aren't being teased anymore means that there's this whole part of their childhood and their development that's not being developed. and
Totally
it's
agree
and
with that.
it's where children learn how to self-regulate within their own peer groups. And self-regulating means that they can tease each other, but then the kids will decide when teasing crosses over into bullying, because there's a healthy amount of teasing and razzing, especially, I don't know if you played any sports as a kid or were on any
I,
teams.
I was a nerd in a sports oriented school, so
Okay, so I'm sure there was some teasing going
just
on
a
and
bit at times. Yeah.
some razzing, and maybe under those circumstances it did cross the line into bullying.
And I love that. And man, that's a personal mission almost I've got. I'm working on a talk goes right along with this. I totally understand and agree with that, and I'm trying to get our parents to understand. And I know parents. My son, he's got long hair. He's got beautiful long hair, but I'll say, "All right, shut up, you long-haired hippie freak," and
Hmm.
he'll laugh. I'm not,
Yeah.
but there are other parents that if I say that to their kid, they're immediately upset and the kid's crying and like, well, hold on. I was playing. This isn't even like locker room teasing. This is just casual joking. I mean, if you really want to get some hardcore teasing, come down to the group I go to that we play cards once a month or so. We tease each other pretty hardcore, but it's never a personal attack. And I think some people don't know how to tease without it being a personal attack, and some people don't know how to take teasing without thinking it's a personal attack. But along those lines, what you said about broken bones, my kids had friends come over who were afraid to climb trees because they would get hurt. And both of these things, kids can't be teased because they're too sensitive. They can't climb trees because they might get hurt. It's like, man, I'm really afraid for future generations.
Well, the thing is, it's like, how do these children grow up to be functioning adults who can actually deal with adversity and
Right.
deal with problems and deal with when things don't go their way?
What do you go do when you go to a job interview and you don't get hired, or you are hired and then they fire you?
Or God forbid, what happens, when somebody in your family gets a terminal illness and you have to deal with that type of adversity? You have to, you know what I mean? Like, there's so many disappointments that we're going to have to deal with in life, regardless of how hard we try and, coddle and protect our loved ones. And, being able to deal with hardships, being able to, have some sort of resilience, being able to deal with failure, with rejection, like, that's just part of life. And if we are not teaching and allowing children, well, first of all, allowing children to go through these disappointments and then teaching them how to become resilient, I am afraid for what this world is going to be like
I
in the
agree.
next 20 years. What kind of leaders are we going to have? What kind of leadership is there going to be? What happens if we have to go to war? What happens if we have to defend ourselves? Like, and of course, and these things are inevitable.
Yeah.
What happens when there's a natural disaster? What happens when we have to make sacrifices and make difficult decisions about how to move forward with the future?
And we talked a bit in the last half of the podcast about perspective, kind of puts it all in perspective about how big of a deal is it really to change the title of your book. Sometimes I think we lose our perspective on those things. Though I personally would have rather had the book with its original title. And even because if I had a kid and they asked what that was, well, now it's a conversation. I need to talk to my kid about it.
Yeah.
And there is I guess, a little bit of desensitization. You know what I'm trying to say? That if I'm going to get so upset if I'm called some word, but I see it and I hear it more often, it doesn't mean as much. And
well, exactly.
By hiding any of these words that are triggers or are hurtful and this, that, and the other thing, it gives them even more power. And that's, I think, part of the problem.
Yes, I completely agree with you. And the other thing is, this book isn't for children.
Right.
So
why are children getting upset about it?
And it's funny because one of the reviewers who reviewed the book on Scribblesworth, he has a podcast and he was saying that, like, anyone 13, 14 or older should be reading this book. This isn't just a book. It is a guide. It is a guide,
Nice.
and he's like a huge champion of the book, talking about, like, the importance it has in society, because it has a lot of things in there that nothing ever gets discussed, and about a girl coming from a sheltered upbringing where nothing was really discussed. And she had these very naive ideas of what her future was going to look like and what sexuality was and things like that. And one of the things that I like to remind people about is nobody ever talks about sexual health, and that having sexual desires is actually healthy. And if a grown adult, male or female, goes to the doctor and says, I haven't had a sex drive in X amount of months or X amount of years, that's actually an indicator that there is something medically wrong beyond sexual function with that person. And it's actually an indicator for lots of different psychological illnesses, mental illnesses, and even some physical ailments.
For as advanced as we've become, we really haven't progressed that far in the last 50, 100 years or so.
Well, that's the whole thing. It's still like this kind of Puritan mentality. And, in Europe, it's very different. They're a little more laissez-faire about,
Right.
sex and sexuality, and
Let me
it
interrupt
is
real quick.
discussed. Mhm.
Uh, do you think, or did you even look into keeping the title for other countries? Do you think it would have worked?
Well, I think in all the English-speaking countries, the algorithm would be the same.
So, got it.
Um, and I haven't gotten to a point yet where I've looked into any sort of translation, but it is a possibility. Who knows where this can go? I'm actually hoping secretly that the book does well enough I can go back to my original title.
Right. Maybe. All right.
Maybe.
So, uh, Jennifer, before we go, do you have any last minute advice for new authors?
Um, just take one little step each day. When you look at the big picture and you think about like the whole project, it can be really daunting. So break it up into small little tasks and small little pieces that are bite sized and manageable. That would be number one. And number two is ask for help. Even if you can't afford to hire somebody, there are so many resources online, and there are so many artists with just a generous spirit where they're happy to talk about their experience and give little tidbits of advice for free. So definitely get help. It takes a village to achieve anything in this world, and surround yourself with a village of support.
There you go. Great. Thank you. I love that. Thanks for all the advice and all the talk today. That was wonderful. I wish you luck on your book.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Discovered Wordsmiths. Come back next week and listen to another author discuss the road they've traveled, and maybe, sometime in the near future, it might be you.